Welcome to the first session of the Habitech Insider podcast. Today we've got Dan and Kiana from Lutron and our very own George, our Lutron product manager, to talk all things Lutron, do a little bit of a manufacturer spotlight, and I suppose tell the world about Lutron lighting controls and shades to those that don't know anything about you. Let's start from the beginning. Where did Lutron come from? What's the history? Let's go through that.
Well, start from the beginning. So Lutron is a light control company. And the company started in the late 50s in the States when the founder of the company developed the idea of bringing a bit of drama to someone's house. And that drama came in the form of lighting control. And lighting control back in the late 50s, early 60s was fairly simple because you had a single bulb sitting in the middle of your room, probably with a cloth-covered shade over the top of it, diffusing light. Mm-hmm. And he gave the ability to basically have those levels of light go up or down and reflect what was happening in the space. Nice and bright when you're entertaining, dim things down when you wanted to. I think Dial In Romance was one of our first really, really poorly judged adverts. And over time, Lutron has kept that principle of being a light control company. That single circuit in your room went into being a couple of circuits. In the early 80s, we started seeing more open plan rooms and greater circuits from there. So products came along like our Graphic Eye, which was the world's first preset scene dimmer, where as opposed to dialing in the combination over a number of different lighting circuits, you could push a button, get a beautiful fade, and have things going from there. We then evolved along from there, from taking total control of the electric light in your space to total control of natural light as well through automating window treatments. And that's become one of the fastest growing portions of our business, both in the UK and globally as well. As architecture evolves, windows get bigger, glass becomes a medium to build with, as opposed to something to just keep the drafts out. And as a result, light from there needs a bit of control too.
Yeah. And I suppose when it comes to window treatments as well, it's not just managing the light, is it? Because you can also, big glass sliding doors and bifold doors that are really popular now, just heat rooms, right? If you've got a south-facing garden, it's also not just controlling light, it's controlling temperature.
Yeah, or you might even just want to protect the flooring in your home. You might have artwork where the glare through the window could be damaging the artwork. So a lot of it could be for protecting what's in the home, sometimes for security, usually just for convenience. But I think that kind of shift from having window treatments just being a manual thing in the window to it being part of the automation is what Dan's saying about controlling all of the lights. So if you imagine you've got a lighting designer working on your home and they put all this amazing layering into the space. You then bring in your lighting control system. Well, okay, not right now because we're in the winter and we've just lost an hour, but normal times, if you imagine you're only really going to use the lighting that you've invested all that money into when it's dark. Because during the day, the light's just going to flood in through the windows. You're just going to get one natural light level, but then you might want to change it. You might be, using the space in your home. You might want to sleep. You might be someone that, doesn't work 9 to 5. You might have, it could be anything. You were watching a film during the day, whatever it might be. You want to be able to control it as part of the same as your artificial lighting. So I think we've seen, it took us a long time to develop our window treatment business, but in the UK anyway, in the States it now is bigger. In the luxury home residential sector, it's bigger than our lighting business. But in the UK, we're kind of seeing the curve come where dealers are understanding that it is part of their package. That actually is their job to try and sell this. It's not just down to the interior designer to do window treatments. So that's helping the growth. Just the market expanding itself from manual to motorized is helping the growth. And, we're seeing some nice sales on that side year after year that's going in the right direction. So yeah, window treatments. We're known for dimming lights.
That's what I was going to say. So obviously we've maybe sort of skirted perhaps what Lutron's mainly known for in custom install anyway, which is primarily lighting controls, and there are curtains and shades and window treatments as well. But I suppose we should probably dig a little deeper on the lighting control side, because prior to coming on board with Habitech and learning about Lutron, my sort of first go-to with Lutron lighting controls was wired solutions.
Homeworks.
Yeah. But I didn't necessarily know it as Homeworks. I just knew it's wired keypads and dimmers. But there's obviously far more to Lutron lighting in terms of product offering, with wireless solutions, from retrofit solutions like RA2 and the newly announced RA3 that's coming, to QS wireless,
Mhm.
and then obviously full-blown wired homeworks as well with those keypads. So
But just to put it back on you though, so you said you thought that when you first heard about Lutron, and you had in your head where you thought Lutron was. Explain where you, as someone that doesn't understand Lutron, well you do now, but when you didn't, where did you think Lutron sits with lighting in the market?
Where did I think? I think it was attached to high-end residential property. Obviously, there's far more to Lutron than just residential property, but the area we focus on is high-end residential. And I thought it was less about the, I would say the quality of the dimmers, and it was more, it's a nice looking keypad on the wall. Now, obviously, the reality of that is it all goes hand in hand, and there isn't any part that's not the nice quality from the way that sometimes lights turn on and lights turn off. It sounds something that's really small and insignificant, but actually, when you put all those things together, it works really nicely. So
it's the whole experience rather than just lighting a space.
Yeah.
But I think it's good to try and see, because most people have an idea of what they think Lutron does. And we've brought loads of stuff out in the last few years that, Dan will go over as well. But everyone has a perception that Lutron sits, it's in the super luxury properties. It's, the most premium product, or it's expensive. It just has some associations that go with it. That I think unless we talk to people, we can't really break that perception, because you've brought loads of products in that, kind of go from, I don't know, £500,000 house up, whereas everyone assumes it's kind of £5 million plus home. But it's just trying to break those perceptions of where we are actually quite key in those.
Yeah, so I suppose that this is probably a good opportunity to talk about those lesser known solutions then. So as somebody,
hence the podcast,
hence Inside Series. So for somebody who has perhaps used an alternative lighting solution, perhaps a wireless one that's not Lutron, what's the differentiator? Why should these people start to consider Lutron as a lighting control for perhaps new build, also retrofit? Where does the product offering align with those objectives?
Well, if you think your initial perceptions of Lutron were formed around it being very high and very luxury, because that's what people put in for awards. That's what goes on websites. That's what goes in glossy brochures, the super luxury stuff. The reality is, for a lot of companies, a lot of their business isn't that super, super high end. There's a lot of other stuff that just doesn't photograph quite as well. As you said, Lutron is known for being a reliable product and having good looking keypads on the walls. And those two things really hark through every single product that we make. The first principle the company has is take care of the customer with superior goods and services. And there was a soundbite and a half. But that actually translates through into everything that we sit there and make. Really, firstly, our dimmers need to be ultra reliable, right? Lighting control, unlike, and we're going to go ahead and annoy some people here, something like an audio system. If the audio in your room doesn't work, it's okay. You can still use the room. There's going to be a sofa there. You can sit down and, God forbid, read a book or do something, one of those things. If the lighting control doesn't work, you can't really use the room. So reliability is key. Also tied into that is people understanding how things work. Some of the pushback that we've seen, particularly from homeowners who are starting to look at technology, is I'm not interested in having a light control system because it's going to be far too complicated. And whenever anyone hears that kind of a pushback, the question that you've got to ask is, why do you believe it's going to be too complicated? And they will come up with, I watched Hunt for Red October the other week, and I saw all the switches and buttons inside that submarine, and I don't want to have that set up in my front room just to turn the lights on. And this is when there's integrators, you smile and you say, well, it doesn't need to be that way. Lighting control should be simple. This is why with every product that we make that sits on the wall, it has an end user experience, stuff that the customers touch and feel. Not only is it supposed to look great, but it's got to be very functional and simple to use as well. So as opposed to going with thousands of buttons, it could be that when you come into your kitchen, you have a button that says welcome, and it just turns on whether it's one circuit or 25 circuits in the largest kitchens. You're not dialing in that combination every time. You're making life simple. And we do that through a means of engraving on buttons, whether it's iconography or text, or in simple areas, just having simple button layouts. If it's your guest WC downstairs, 2 buttons probably does it. Top one turns the lights on, bottom one turns the lights off.
Or a motion sensor, and there's no key press at all.
Yeah.
But that simplicity and that reliability really is key as we start looking into products that are more accessible to the entire UK population. If you look at the way that smart home technology has become prevalent in most people's homes these days, 10 years ago when we were talking about homeworks jobs only, Smart home tech was all very, very expensive. It was all incredibly bespoke. Nowadays, through voice assistants or smartphones in your pocket, people are more accustomed to having technology in their lives. Why wouldn't they go ahead and bring that in their homes as well? And this is where we have to look at making sure those solutions that come in stay simple to use and stay reliable. Because at the end of the day, I'm trying to win business away from my biggest competitor. And my biggest competitor isn't any one of the other brand names that's out there. My biggest competitor by far is the standard white plastic light switch that just does on and off, because it's very inexpensive. It's incredibly reliable. It's very simple for people to understand how it works. Now I can go ahead and beat those guys and tie with them quite easily with reliability and with style on the wall. The inexpensive side of things, well, this is where I have to go ahead and offer a lot more features than you're going to get with an on-off switch. I'm going to give you the ability to dim a circuit, to control a circuit from multiple places, to have a single button at your front door that turns every light off
Nice,
when you
easy
leave.
app to use. Like a simple app, right?
Absolutely.
So I suppose the old way of, and I'm talking way in the past, was walk into a room, there is a single sort of ceiling rose pendant, and in that situation, the on-off light switch works. Kiana, we were speaking earlier about people that are doing big kitchen renovations, and it's all big, open plan, lovely areas. But now it's not just one or two lights or circuits of lights. We're now talking, 25 to sometimes way beyond that, nearly three figures of circuits in some of the bigger houses. So I suppose the nice tie-in for Lutron is how do you offer something simple on quite a complex.
But I think that's what's kind of changed, hasn't it? So when, like my parents' home when I was younger, it would have been one light in the dining room, maybe two in the lounge. Whereas I think we all just read magazines, we're on Instagram, we see things of like the luxury homes, and we aspire to have homes like that. So, you had IKEA when I was at uni. You now have loads of furniture and like soft furnishing things that you can buy for your home that are affordable. So we look at pictures of really nice homes and we want to replicate it. So, you might still not get the electrician round. You might still only have one pendant, but you go and get a nice table lamp, a floor lamp. Like it's quite easy to layer up light to make the home feel comfortable. And it's ultimately about having the perfect light in your space. Whether you're entertaining, reading a book or doing homework with the kids, there is a perfect light that goes with the task. That though, if you then need to go up to and, get under the sofa to press a button, or you need to go and click underneath the table lamp, that's where just having a button makes it really, really simple. Yeah. So whether we're selling homeworks or RA2 or just a simple Pico with one table lamp, the reliability and the quality is there. So we end of line test everything. So that whether we're in the £100 million home or the £500,000 home, what you're buying from Lutron comes with that kind of that guarantee that comes with the brand. It's going to work. And that's what's been quite nice, because I think in the UK, unlike the States, we went in at the top end of market and only ever dealt in luxury. But we have now brought in products that's just made that lovely stuff that you can put in your home just accessible to, I would say, normal people. Because it was always just for the super wealthy.
Yeah. I'm a testament to that. I'm not super wealthy.
And same. And I think I would put RA2 in my house because it just adds a nice bit of, the stuff with technologies, if you're really new to this as a homeowner, and, I would use my parents as an example, because my mum would be really scared of putting any tech into the home. But she's like, but it might not work. Like, what if it stops working? If we've got people over, it'll be embarrassing.
What if my internet stops?
Exactly. Yeah, and they do. And everyone assumes that your lighting is working on Wi-Fi. And I think one of the things, because we ultimately invented dimming at home, like the dimmer switch, rotary dimmer was made by Mr. Joel Sparrow. Like we know what we're doing on this. So we are never going to put you in a situation where you're buying some gadgety things off some cheap website and playing around with it. And that's fine. And if people want to experiment, I think they always will. But if you're putting Lutron in your home, it's going to work on the same level as that light switch. Once it's in, it's reliable. So people that are scared, I think, it's often you turn to Google and just searching random things because you want to dip your toe into that smart home world. But the dealers that buy Lutron and resell it, I think they just have that peace of mind, but they're not going to get the phone call saying, my light stopped working, like get back here and fix it. Don't know why I do voices when I do homeowners.
The nerves of the camera, that's what it is. I suppose one thing that I personally felt is you become very accustomed to the one button that does a lot of lights. to the point where sometimes now, and you say you use your parents as an example, I use my parents as an example now, is because when I go to their house, it drives me mad because it takes them like 5 minutes to turn the lights on in the room, of walking around turning different lamps on, and then and now the sun's gone down, so those lights go off. So just get a button. Let's sort this out. And I have slowly getting there. I've done the kitchen now. We'll get there.
But it's kind of a paradigm shift, right? If you imagine when, probably not our generation, but go back like a few more years, and I'm going to try not to put too many ages on this, but when you bought a car, some of the windows were wind up. Maybe in the back they were wind up. Like, I don't think you can buy a car now that has wind up windows. I've not checked.
Okay.
Do you think?
Yeah.
But I mean, there will
some
come a
budget
time. There
ones.
will definitely come a time where they just don't make it anymore. And I think that's kind of potentially there is a way where this will happen. You still get people that will have a non-smartphone mobile phone. It's very rare to see now, isn't it? Whereas when I was at school, like, I mean, everyone just had a Nokia, or, you know, at the best they had a BlackBerry, but everyone's got a smartphone. So I think that paradigm shift of things just becoming automated, technology moves quick, doesn't it? So that person that still wants to buy a car with a wind-up window is probably going to be happy with a switch.
Yeah.
But ultimately, convenience. Our lives are just, I mean, the pandemic proved to everyone, we all sat there and ordered everything on certain websites and had deliveries from them every single day. The same thing, you know, if you sit and watching TV, I know it's lazy, but we've got remote controls. No one stands up and changes the channel anymore.
Rather than laziness.
Oh, well, let's go with efficiency. Well, it's just comfort and it's ease.
Yeah.
We've always got our phones next to us. So actually, if I'm watching TV, I use my app a lot on the R2 because even though I have a Pico on the coffee table, I just get my phone's always next to me. So if I want to change something, and that's something that once you've lived with it, it's quite hard to go back.
It's adding value, right? It's just being able to
pure convenience
without having to make too much effort. You can make the space work for you.
Absolutely. And I think with the new products we brought out on wireless battery operated shades for that home where it's not having a full refurb, so it's say the house that's had big extension on the back, Homework's always kind of limited us a bit because it needed to be a full rewire. Now you've got RA2, you've got battery shades, actually having everything on one app. Again, it's pure, you know, efficiency. But do you really want to open up multiple apps to get things done? If you want to turn on your music and you want to lower your shades and dim your lights, isn't it nicer just to be able to press a button as opposed to going to 3 separate apps on the phone?
So I suppose that you touched on a subject there that I think is probably quite a good point to clarify. So let's take new build out the equation for a second. Let's say Integrator's gone into a existing home and they've gone, right, I need to retrofit here. This is the MK white light switch on the wall. What Lutron solutions are there? Obviously, treat this as people that don't know about RA2, they don't know about QS Wireless. Where do we start and where do we end up?
So where we start is we're a lighting control company. So we start with the circuit, the electrical circuit of light that you have in the space. And if we look at your parents' home, Charles, where they've got that pendant sitting in the front of the room, that's a single circuit. So to go ahead and control that, more likely than not, we would use an inline dimmer. So it basically sits in between the circuit and the existing light switch that you have in the space. And that becomes the dimmer in the area. So that will go ahead and control the lighting circuit. The switch that you have on the wall, we take off that 230-volt device, splice the cables together to permanently feed the circuit, and then a Lutron battery-powered keypad goes over the front of that.
So UK single gang?
UK single gang, yep, sits straight on the box there. And that gives you a nice, simple retrofit. Where we can then sit there and do is, because we're using radio frequency, we can add in other devices to speak to the speaker as well. Now, the radio frequency that we use isn't the 2.4 or 5G that you're using on your home Wi-Fi system. In fact, we're not even using your home's Wi-Fi. We're using a little RF network that Lutron sets up at 868 megahertz in the house. And what this ensures reliable communication. We talked at the beginning, I'm competing against a plastic switch, which is very reliable. I have to keep my communications reliable as well. So sitting outside of the common Wi-Fi bandwidths means that it's a very low traffic area. So our signals go through quite easily. We're not sending reams and reams of information. We're sending button pushes. So at 868, we send a small amount of information. We can send it a heck of a long way, and we can do it incredibly reliably. Because things are working on wireless, it means you can go ahead and add things easily. If you want to have a secondary control position, you want a light switch on the other side of the room, you don't need to sit there and run electrical cable into a back box. We can have a battery-powered switch on the other side of the room. Doesn't even need to have a back box in the wall. You can just affix it straight to the wall. If you're in a kitchen space and you want control on a kitchen island, we can do control sitting on a pedestal there. And it starts to bring in, this efficiency of control that we're talking about. It's easy to think efficiency of control is a luxury thing, right? Because I'm walking into a palatial property and I'm going to press one button and 58 circuits are going to do something spectacular. But let's talk about efficiency of control as a convenience thing. In your parents' house, Charles, they've got the one light in the middle of the room and they have a number of table lamps. And as you said, it takes them 5 minutes to get things turned on. So one of two things happens. Either they sit there and they waste 10 minutes of life every day, first turning everything on, then turning everything off. Or they don't use the light. They just walk into the space, they click the light switch at the door when they walk in, and they go, I suppose that'll do. By employing more control circuits in, and for the table lamps, we have a simple plug-in table lamp dimmer, where literally you unplug the table lamp from the wall socket it's plugged into, you plug our dimmer into a standard 13 amp socket, you plug the table lamp into that, and then it programs onto the system. So you can turn things on, you can turn things off. And suddenly, because you have this, efficiency of control for convenience purposes, you'll find that you're using the space a lot more, you're using the lights a lot more. As we start to look for the window treatments side of this piece as well, we make window treatments that have RF control going into them, so we don't need to get a cable to them for data purposes. We also make window treatments that are controlled by a standard D-cell or AA batteries. So technically, you don't need any cables whatsoever. They can purely retrofit into space. By bringing them into this controlled convenience, again, you tend to use them a lot more, as opposed to looking at a flank of 3 or 4 windows and going, oh, I don't feel like closing the first one and then closing the second and the third and the fourth. From a single button or from a voice command or even from a time clock, we can go ahead and automate these. And as a result, you get a lot more use out of the spaces because you're taking the technology you've invested into that space and really putting it to its best use.
So I suppose that's a good point. It's not just, because if you break this down, I remember when I first pitched triathlon blinds to my mum, she said, well, what's wrong with the pull cord on the side? I'm like, yeah, but you have 4 of them and you're going to change them all manually. Now, the reality of that is that it's more than just replacing the pull cord. Yes, they move up and down by themselves, but it's more clever than that for the reason you said, automating at sunset every day, just make the blinds go down because that's what she's going to do anyway. You eliminate the button press. It's there if she wants to manually control it, but my opinion of a smart home is it's almost minimal interaction, right? It should react to you rather than you having to set, I want that blind at this height and that blind at that height. So I think that's important. It's more, automation rather than just replacing light switches and pull cords with remote controls.
And that's why I think one of them is just, sorry to interrupt. So like the daylight, the tracking the astronomical time clock on Lutron, like that was clever. Lots of companies now do it. But the newest thing we patented on the wood blinds, got a picture behind, is natural light optimization. So what that does is even better than like sunset and sunrise, is it will track the sun around your house and put them into tilt into a fade fighter position, I think we call it. And it basically stops the sun being able to glare through and fade your carpet, damage the sofa, and ultimately just make the room uncomfortable with glare. So if you think, it's clever that without a button press, it can open at sunrise and close at sunset, you can now have it just naturally move during the day to give you the best light in the room and protect your furniture. That's kind of what I like about Lutron, is they just think a bit further ahead and come up with stuff that's just a little bit cleverer. That just makes the house a nicer place.
And that's a nice touch as well, because I think when we're in this world, we become very, accustomed to technology, and we're used to it. So, for example, what you just described there with the fade fighter, the slats of the blind moving automatically. To us, it's like, well, yeah, of course they do that.
Yeah.
But to end users that have no experience with this stuff, that is like, whoa, that's amazing. What do you mean it does it by itself?
It's technology that you actually want, that actually makes the home nicer. Sometimes people, and I actually don't think Lutron does this, but sometimes stuff is made for the sake of it. I think with what Lutron brings out, whether it's on their blinds, window treatments, or lighting, it's stuff that people want. Like they always have the end user in mind. And when I saw NLO, and there's a great YouTube video on it, you should go and have a look at it if you've not seen it, because it's a 3-minute video that just explains why you would want this in your home. So it's not a gimmick. Like we don't make products that are gimmicky. It's not a fad. It's not let's catch the next person that's into IoT or smart home. because stuff we want to put in needs to last, and it needs to be a purpose to the technology.
I think another point that would be very interesting to make at this level is that there's actually this misconception that all of this technology becomes really complex and you need to have this PhD or be an engineer,
Yeah.
or you need to employ a third party to come into your home to configure all of these things for you. But actually with RA2, the power is in your phone.
Yeah, and the
user
homeowner can do a lot.
Has the power. They truly own the system and they can customize the system themselves. And I think that's very important for today's users, today's consumers.
But a good integrator can do a lovely job on RA2 or Homeworks. And I always said, and I think it was Sam Woodward that said this to me, is Lutron hardware is like the best ingredients you could buy.
Absolutely.
But the dinner that is made from those ingredients is purely dependent on the chef, who is the integrator.
Yeah.
But on RA2, I would say it is so simple. I tested it with my children who are 8 and 9. They set up their own scenes. So they've only got a blind and a table lamp and their, night light and the main pendant on it. So don't get me wrong, it's not some complex system. But they've managed to get Alexa to do what they want it to do. They've done their Picos and they have their app on their little iPods. So it really is simple. I mean, ideally an integrator should be finishing this nicely for a homeowner, but I think what's nice is, again, one of the misconceptions that you get with Lutron is I'm held to ransom. Like, what do? I've got to call someone out and it costs me like £1 million for them to come to my house. And, everyone gets wrapped around this. It's not the case. You can make all the changes you want to make on the app. Yeah. And RA2 is simple.
You can choose still to call an integrator.
You absolutely need someone to set it up properly. Yeah.
But once it's kind of set up as a basic, then the power is back at the customer's hand, and the customer can then make it its own system rather than having to always call back that professional.
And what's nice with RA2, I think, Dan mentioned the 13 amp table lamp plugin.
Yeah.
On Homeworks, whenever you're adding stuff in, you still need to get back to the main database and kind of reprogram it. I know this because I tried. But on RA2, it's really nice. So if you just buy a new table lamp, you're not going to call anyone. You just need to go and buy one.
Yeah. So that's, I suppose, an important topic there. So there are obviously some differentiators between RA2 and QS, Homeworks QS. So what are because I think there's probably a perception out there from integrators who haven't dealt with Lutron but have come across a takeover on a project and there's Lutron in there. And the customer's asking me to change this and that. So what are the training requirements for RA2? What are the training requirements for Homeworks QS? How does that work for an integrator?
Do you want this one, Dan?
Okay, I'll go ahead. So the training requirements. Not yet. The training requirements for RA2 are relatively simple. We have a number of online training courses that can be accessed through Lutron's Lighting Control Institute. So this is our training portal. You can find it at lutron.com /LCI Online Europe. It's a little bit of a mouthful.
Really memorable.
And what the LCI Online will go ahead and get you is a number of training modules designed around RA2 Select to show you how a system sets up, how to set time clocks, how to do things such as this, to give you a little bit more confidence when you're walking into the system the first time. The reality is, as a custom installer, once you've played with the app, it programs from an app that sits on your iOS or Android device. Once you've done the first one of those, you realize that the training that you set, it wasn't that necessary because the app is so simple in terms of how it sets you forward for programming things. It really lets you get on with it. The idea with RA2 is technically, if you're a homeowner, you could go ahead and find the components for this from one of your local resellers, have your professional electrician go ahead and install it with any of the 230-volt mains requirements that are there. But you could program the system without the need for an integrator coming in. Now, what we find is even though RA2 has been set up that way, most customers tend to sit more on the DIFM market as opposed to DIY. They want someone to do it for me. So they will get an integrator involved to come in and do that first initial setup. But then, as Kiana was saying earlier, the system is then in their own hands to make changes. Homeworks is a bigger set of training requirements than that because Homeworks is a much more powerful control system. The processor that lives inside the Homeworks system is programmed via a laptop-based software, and it allows you to program in a lot more integration capabilities, a lot more things you can do with conditional logic. So if this happens, then I want that to happen along the lines from there. As a result of this, as Kiana was saying, the importance in how we put these ingredients together is down to the chef who sits there and makes everything. So we have a number of training programs in place for installers who want to go ahead and do homeworks. The training at the moment consists of a 4-day course where you purchase some training hardware from us. It gets shipped out to you because we're still doing all of our training remotely, because as much as we'd like this pandemic to be over, it doesn't seem like it's happening tomorrow. And if you ask me the question, I'll probably say the same thing again tomorrow.
And to be fair, it's more convenient for a lot of people too, because their engineers being trained for a few hours over 4 days in their office is probably much easier than having them completely out of the office for 4 days coming to our training centre. So I think pandemic has probably tweaked how we've done things, but really the feedback is probably what works. Which does the job.
I think we've got a lot of positive feedback in that sense, because we also have lots of people that are quite far away from
London.
The big London,
the
big smoke, and that's an added cost as well. If you've got 2-3 engineers that you want to get trained, then it's
trains,
accommodation, transport, and etc. for 3-4 days, which it becomes a little bit more convenient to be done.
And then the best thing is, because we shipped you the hardware that you're using for training, and this is real hardware, so it's processors, it's dimmer modules, it's keypads. Once you've completed the training, that hardware is yours. So you retain it. You can build it into your demonstration space to show it to people. You can set up a test rig, so you can sit there and play around with it, and you can keep working on it even after physical classroom sessions have sat there and ended. The qualifying training also basically allows you access to the software. We want to make sure that every single job out there that's done on the homework system is installed and programmed by someone who is competent in programming. So to that extent, the homework software itself is password protected. So when you first load the software on your computer and open it up, it's going to ask you for a username and password, which will be unique to you, and that's tied back to your training record with Lutron. So if you've not been trained by it, even if you've managed to find a copy of the software, you wouldn't be able to get the software to work, because the reality is we want every Lutron job out there to work perfectly. We want the customer experience to be great. And that customer experience comes down to, how the system has been programmed. For homeowners who phoned up to say that their Lutron system isn't working properly, generally what we find is the system is working absolutely exactly how it's supposed to. When you press a button, it does whatever it's programmed to do flawlessly first time and every time. The disjoint is that the button's not doing what they're expecting it to do. Now, on a homework system, much like with Ratsu, if they have access to the app, they can go ahead and modify the programming themselves. Particularly at this time of year, as the clocks have just changed, it's nice to tweak a few of your scenes. So we give homeowners that capability, but the basics of the program that gets set up, it's much like when you're engineering a car and you start putting in the various wirings to make things work. If you don't build the fundamental blocks properly, you're always going to be in an uphill battle. So over the last few years, we have definitely become a lot more restrictive with who has access to our software, to make sure that everybody who's out there doing homeworks is, working with an industry that is very smart and very knowledgeable. And you don't have sort of rogue agents going around doing jobs that sit there and discredit the Lutron name, and also the name of every custom installer in the industry as well.
And I suppose that's not uniquely even a Lutron approach, is it? I know some of our other Manor of Wisdom are very protective, rightly so, because they just want the experience to be spot on. I always use car analogies. You buy a new car from somewhere. If you want that warranty, get it serviced by the manufacturer. Keep it in exactly as they want it. Done. It's all under their control. The end user is hopefully always going to be, happy and referring more friends and family.
And that's what drives us, right? It's that homeowner experience. And with homeworks, it's a global policy. So the training is strict exactly for that reason. So going on the cooking analogy, because I like analogies, we've just got to make sure the chefs are good enough. We can't have someone that, burns the toast going, but I want access, because they're going to give a rubbish experience and it does damage our brand. People that have good experiences might tell their friends. People that have bad experiences definitely tell their friends.
Yeah.
So I think, we've had the experience center open now for 4 years.
Yeah.
And you often, at the start, when we used to see some homeowners, you would get feedback from them. We've had a lot of homeowners come in on their own. Sometimes they come in with their dealers, but on their own too, and go, I had it and I hated it. It was just so complicated. I didn't know what any of the buttons did. I just ended up pressing one of them all the time because I never really knew what else it was all doing. And that's just really bad. Like, whoever did that is kind of lazy.
I think that's quite often that usual case of
I'll
just
come
because I
back,
can,
live with it for a bit, and I'll come
do
back.
this, rather than actually knowing what they're doing and actually giving the customer something that is going to be useful. for
Yeah,
them.
that
It's
the
just
customer
oh,
wants.
I've got all of this power that
Mhm.
Homeworks allows me to do, so I'm going to cram in
Yeah.
all of this.
Well, 10 button
technology.
keypads, right? So if you look
And
at this
then
tabletop
it just
keypad,
confuses.
if you imagine
the
if you
whole-
had that on your wall, if I gave
Yeah.
that to my mum, she would be mortified. And I think C-Touch, there are still people out there that put 10 button keypads on the wall.
Yeah.
But what I liked when we launched Palladium is the single column
Yeah.
4 button kind of became the
I think
popular
there's place for
keypad.
both things, and you need to be a professional to really understand when it's time to
Mm-hmm.
put 10 buttons because that customer is going to use it, and when it's time
When you're
to
just
say
overkilling.
2
Yeah.
buttons, well engraved, well finished, and then do all the logic of the background and give them
Exactly.
based on the time, based on something else happening in the house, then something happens within this room when you press that.
Yeah,
one
yeah.
button.
Again, to keep to our cooking analogies, I think it's very important that as a chef who is incredibly skilled at taking all these various components and putting them together to make something delightful, memorable, and wonderful, it's good to also have that interaction with whoever you're going to be feeding to make sure you're getting what they're looking for.
Yeah.
And
true.
sometimes 10 buttons is appropriate. If you have a client who's sitting there and they have very specific things that they're looking to do and they're driving that, absolutely.
Mm.
But as I said, the this join generally when someone says a system isn't working, normally the system is doing everything it's supposed to be, whether it's a lighting control, audio, or anything else that we sit in the modern integrated home.
Mm.
It's that somewhere there's been a disjoin between what I'm expecting to happen when I push that button and what actually happens. And that can either be down to slightly shoddy programming or just bad communication along the way of what's actually expected.
Miscommunication and interpretation of requirements. Absolutely.
So I suppose the next thing I'd like to touch on, we've covered training, we've covered a little bit about retrofitability. That's a word. Apologies.
It now is.
It now is. And homeworks from everything from your average home to big London mansion.
Mhm.
I suppose what I'd like to hear from you, George, for those that don't know you, we've obviously partnered with Lutron as Habitech. We see them as a real long-term partner. So how do you fit into the puzzle? What's your role here? How can we support and give back to the dealers? How do we add? What's your value add?
So my value is basically I came into Habitech as someone that's been working in the industry with lighting controls for 15 years. I was actually part of the Lutron family for some time, and I think my value is that of education. Is I can come into these dealers' houses, even to an end user, and just help ensure that the solution is the right solution for that user, rather than just the big seller.
Mhm.
It's the support of end-to-end of a project where we can ensure the right product is there at the right time, and to a certain degree as well, kind of upholds the Lutron values at the end user level, making sure that all the dealers that we are putting products out there are really installing them correctly and giving them the best, as in we're giving them the ingredients and they're cooking the best possible meal for that end user.
So really it's from initial design
Inquiries.
consultation to specification in terms of bill of materials, talking through the options.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to touch on the Lutron Experience Centre in London.
Yeah.
I know we as Habitech have sort of taken a piece from that ourselves, and we've really changed our facilities to be far more end user focused, to not because we want to go after end users, because of course that's not something we as Habitech do, but it's a tool for our customers to bring their end users in, and ultimately they come in with a preconception or no idea about what's possible. They come in and they see blinds that can move themselves, they can see a cinema room, and they have a sort of a preset expectation. So talk about the Experience Centre. How does that involve for people that want to partner with Lutron and Habitech? What's that opportunity?
I think it's being able to actually give the customer the experience versus explaining what experience they're going to get.
Yeah.
And that's as Charles saying is we've got that facility here if the customer wants to just have a taster for it. Well, we also have the ability to bring customers to your experience in London and give them a full suite of the experience, an extended experience of the Lutron value.
I think any of your dealers that have got a client that wants to see it, sometimes it's nice just to focus on the lighting. So I think we found since we've had it is, you guys have got an amazing showroom here and they're coming here to get a taste of a lot of things. What's quite nice is if they just want to have a conversation about lighting and shading, there's focus. We don't have fancy cinema to distract them.
There's no other toys to distract.
Exactly.
There's
And
no
you know what?
noise
It's not a place. It's not a showroom because we don't sell in there. It's purely to give an experience of how to. When I joined, we had our old office in Wapping, and I joined and we had a few dealers we looked after, and I was like, how do we explain this? Because I always go back to that thing of how do I explain this to my mum? And honestly, it's not that easy to do unless someone sees the space.
I think it was a game changer in the industry to actually be able to translate that explaining into
experience.
Here it is. You can actually walk in, you can feel it, you can actually experience.
And if a dealer is with an end user and they've not necessarily sold Lutron before, I think it's they're trying to brush up on a sales pitch and it's really difficult. You know what? Save yourself the pain. Bring them in. Book yourself a slot. It's a private tour. Let them have a tour. The burden is off you. Let us do our thing and then take it from there.
It's also great. We kind of have a couple of samples here on our table. It's great to actually put a keypad in a customer's hand. But actually when you pick that keypad and put it on a nice wallpaper or like we did here in our showroom, or when we put it in the context of a decorated space with furniture, it gives that high level of perception of what they can possibly achieve within their own space. So I think it's important to have that as I think we can call it a sales tool, but even though we're not trying to take a
it's hard. If you're in a meeting, sometimes you have to put them out on a table, don't you, and show them. But you're spot on. When that's on the wall and it's got backlighting on it, and it's actually in the same way that someone's going to buy it, then it shows itself off.
The light in the space is actually shining on it, so it gives it a different perspective because it's different to see it that way or that way.
And do you know what? It's exactly the same with our blinds. So you can buy the little demo bag and pull them
up.
Which
like everyone.
And do you know what? Like you're really, if it's the only way you can show it, because you're going to someone's house or you're meeting in an office with like maybe the interior designer and architect there, it's all you got. But I tell you, the power of seeing it in a space and actual blinds going up and down, you can't compare it.
Once you see the intelligent hem bar alignment, that's usually when people kind of go.
And it's seeing blinds go up and curtains open, seeing two directional movement.
No one ever actually thinks of it being an issue until they actually see it all kind of lining up perfectly.
You don't, do you? Because you don't know that.
Oh yeah, that always bugged me. But
you didn't realise it did. Yeah.
I never did anything about it because it was just a thing. I didn't realise.
And you know when someone
fix it, and it's like, wow.
When someone first told me about hem bar alignment, they told me about the broken tooth look as you come into London on the train in the buildings. And I've never been able to unsee it now. So every time you look at a building, the architect cared when one of the floors has got hem bar alignment going all the way across, and then the other ones are like broken teeth.
Whenever you look at the CGI renders for these buildings that they're putting up, everything's perfectly lined up. It doesn't look one bit like it looks when they actually come out. And it's those little things that start to make a huge difference. I mean, the benefit of traveling around with a car full of samples means that we can start to get people interested. You can start to look at the design language on a keypad or some of the detailing on the brackets of the blind. And you start to understand how it's going to physically look in your space. But the experience facilities that you guys have here in Basingstoke and we have in Moorgate are designed for you to really immerse yourself in seeing the intangibles, just all the things that you didn't think would actually matter, that suddenly become critically important. Things like quiet operation, things like backlighting that, the intensity of the backlighting on a keypad varies depending on how bright the room is. So when you go to bed at night and you turn all the lights off in your bedroom, the backlighting on your keypad dims down so it's not a distraction. It's all these little things, just tiny, tiny little things that start to add up and make a really, really big difference in the overall way you're looking at things.
Cool. And it's a big investment, right? If you're doing your house up, whether it's an extension or it's a new build, this stuff's going into the home. Like this isn't a cushion or a rug that you're going to change. This is going into the infrastructure of the home, whether it's the blinds or the keypads and the wired or wireless system. So people don't say, oh, I'll just buy a really cheap plastic keypad because, I need to save the £40 on that one. It's a whole system. It's going into, you don't save that on your kitchen. You never buy a cheap worktop in your kitchen. You don't buy cheap flooring because everyone gets that that's in for the lifespan of the home.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas, I think we just have to let people make their own minds up. So I think if you show it to the homeowner, let them make their own decisions, because often we do find, I did my home up, unfortunately, before I came to Lutron. But you find value in things as you're doing a build, whether you're building a £100 million house or a £500,000 house, you find value in things. You might buy nicer tiles. You might pay a bit more for a decorative light that's going to be in for a long time. And I think with Lutron, when people learn about the extra things they can have, they do see the value in it. And that's why everyone always goes over budget, because with everything we buy, we find value in it. And, one of the things we didn't touch on, so we touched on RA2 and Homeworks. I think one of the cleverest thing we did was with Homeworks Wireless is all of the capability of RA2 with the retrofit dimmers is
convenience of the,
it's being able to add to it, right? So the amount of jobs where you go over budget, so the homeowner just starts scrapping rooms off the plan. They go, just don't put it in there because it'll never get used. It's the fourth guest room or whatever it might be. But then when you want that all off button, that's probably the bedroom on the third floor that you never want to go up to turn the light on.
Mode when you actually want to be on holiday and
exactly.
have your house look like it's occupied.
And then someone else buys the house and they go, well, why is that room not on the system? Yeah. It's really annoying. And before you couldn't do it, could you? Because it wasn't wired, no one cabled to it. Whereas now you can go and get the Homeworks version of that inline dimmer, go and put it in, add a hybrid repeater, and boom, the whole thing's on the same system.
Where do you see then the smart affecting the homeowner expectancies? Well, where do you see that the intelligent systems affecting the buying decision making of a home owner?
So I think on the luxury properties, the Homework system or a high-end, like a luxury system that's gone into a luxury home, I think those expectations sit there with those buyers because they've often got multiple properties around the world and they're used to having certain things in their home.
They look to manage those properties probably from afar as well.
And they like to be able to go to their, place in New York, place in London, wherever it might be, and they want the same thing. They want it to be something that they're comfortable and they know how to use it. But I think what's been great is this kind of filtered down a bit into what I would call normal people, like our homes, and more mass, exactly, more mass market. And it still isn't quite, don't get me wrong, I don't think we're quite in a position where every light switch is going to be gone and it's going to be replaced with a keypad of any sort. But the expectation of having smart home, or at least smart home ready, is getting more and more.
I read something a few weeks back that said 10% of homes in the UK have a smart device in them. So a voice assistant or a television with smart properties are in that. And that number is going to increase to over. It basically increases exponentially every single year. You combine that with, it's the younger generation. And I say this as a 40-year-old guy sitting on the sofa who are starting to buy homes now. And we're talking about homeowners who have grown up in a world where most thing is technology to them. So they're expecting some form of technology in a property. Now, if you put a smart control system in, whether it's RA2, Select, or Lutron, is that going to drastically increase the value of the property? Potentially not, particularly when we're looking at sort of the more normal homes for normal people. However, what it does do is you walk through the door, and of all the various pieces of smart technology that are in a property when you're going to view it, you don't tend to interact with any of them. You don't interact with the fantastic Wi-Fi network that's there. You don't interact with the hidden speakers in the ceilings or the multi-room audio system. You interact with the lighting control because you walk to the front door and the first thing you do is you turn the lights on. Mm. And so, having that as a smart touch point when you walk in, it might not increase the value of the property, but it certainly differentiates it from non-smart properties. And chances are it'll allow it to sell faster than a property that isn't, got smart technology that's that apparent.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think if I was looking to buy now and you went and saw 3 houses and you thought they were all lovely and you could see yourself living there, if there's one that's probably already got a bit of a smart home infrastructure backbone already there, that's probably the one I'd lean towards. So just before we finish up, I think it's really important, because as you said, there's a huge area of growth for Lutron as a whole, and hopefully a big area of growth for the UK as a whole, is window treatments. Or it is window treatments, right? That's what you guys got. I used to call them blinds, and then I got told off.
Well, because there's tracks and there's blinds, there's aromas, there's Venetian. So window treatments would kind of be the umbrella of
course. So window treatments, I would say that most custom install integrators, I don't want to say miss the opportunity, but are almost a bit scared of blinds.
Yeah.
Because there's what if I get the measurements wrong and I've messed that bit up? But I think with triathlon and the battery operated solutions that Lutron have, I think it's important to talk about. So it's not always I have to get a wire there. You can retrofit these solutions in, and there's a whole different portfolio I know you have. So would you mind sort of touching on the opportunity for the UK integrators on window treatments?
So wired and wireless, the technology's awesome in all of them. If anything, it's probably newer technology in our battery products now. Everyone always thinks if it's a battery product, it's slightly inferior. Not true. So it will come down to what someone wants in their home. If they want to have it wired because they're doing a full refurb, it makes sense. Then you don't have to change batteries. But sometimes you just can't do it. Sometimes it's too late. Sometimes no one thought about the fact that they would want a window treatment in a room, and then the walls are plastered, finished and painted, and you're like, oh, what do I do? So we were quite limited on battery products. We only had the roller and the honeycomb, and we're working on that. We've launched the wood blinds, and we've just in the States launched palladium battery, which is like the most premium product you can buy. It's beautiful. Yeah, it's very expensive for a blind that compared to a triathlon, but when you see what it is and the kind of how beautiful it can make the room, it's worth it. But we're growing, and we're putting a lot of investment into kind of growing that product portfolio on the retrofit side of things, because sometimes cabling isn't that easy, especially in the UK where everything's got like steel and bricks, and not everything's made out of wood. But really, it's just about opening up the conversation as the integrator. So whether you want to sell battery or wired, that bit doesn't matter. But you're 100% right. They're scared of doing it. Every single AV dealer integrator that I've spoken to, they're scared of doing it because they think it's going to go wrong and they're going to lose all the profit on the job. And, then they definitely don't want to do it again. Yeah. And then even the ones that kind of get past the measuring side of things, because let's face it, there's a lot of other stuff that takes a lot of detail that integrators do in a home every day. They're not scared of that. They're scared of a tape measure. So I think sometimes it's the fear of selling fabric. It's the fear of being the expert in the room about recommending a fabric, because it's just not their thing. Like, are they now turning into interior designers? Are they talking about aesthetics? And I could go on for hours, but I'll plug my training. I give a how to sell shades training, because I used to just go in and do it with the accounts that I looked after. And we realized actually whether they're selling shades decently on majority of the jobs or not doing it at all, they all seem to come in and take something from it. And it's purely trying to make people just feel more confident. We never expect the integrator to become the interior designer. We never want someone to sit there and be like, this is beautiful. You should use like horsehair silk because of this, that, and the other. It's not the conversation. It's much more about what window treatment should go in what room and in what window to get the best out of that space. We don't sell soft treatments. So if it's a Roman blind, the interior designer will figure that fabric out. If it's a curtain, we supply the track, you go and get the curtain somewhere else. So we are not, an interior design company that's trying to sell decorative, soft fabrics. But it's a big part of the package that is usually equal to or greater than the lighting control side of the package. So if you're already doing the Lutron part on the lighting, you are missing a trick if you're not doing the window treatments. Because
probably also, I'd say, doing the end user a disservice.
Absolutely, because then where do they go for that bit?
And then they've got two systems.
Yeah, then they've got multiple remotes, they've got multiple apps, and I'm not saying we are absolutely the best in the world, and I'm going to stand by that. I actually think we are. I don't know if I have any facts to back that up. But if you're putting in Lutron lighting control, you clearly see a value in putting in, best in class. You should be looking at what Lutron offers on the window treatments, because I think you're right. You're not doing your client a service if you don't at least give them the options.
I think you hit something very important in your blinds training, because I have been there, and yes, you can go on for hours. It was a bit of an eye opener for me, because I came in probably from the techie engineering point of view of, right, okay, how can we make this work? But actually, it was a bit of an eye opener because it wasn't use this fabric, use that fabric. It was, okay, here's a scenario. And the one I used was the lovely sort of panoramic view of the bay. And you had a light colored fabric comes down in front, and when the sun hit the fabric, completely obscured the view, couldn't see anything. But if you use a dark fabric in that space, that actually the view, the blind has come down, but you can still see the view, right? You can see the view. Now that was the stuff that was like, whoa, okay, didn't expect that. And that's where I think it's really important, talking about openness of weave and fabric and the, I suppose, the thermal properties that you touched on it in the training, I think are really important. So if anyone is out there who hasn't done it, contact George, contact your account manager, contact Lutron, get on that training, because I think it's a huge opportunity that, custom install integrators could pick up on.
And even if you've done it a bit, say you've sold a few and you're like, I could do it, but I didn't really see the point. It's still worth doing it. It's still worth doing the sales training. And we have a certified shades training course, which you have to go on, and it's now 4 days. I think it's 4 hours per day over 4 days. And that goes through all of our systems in detail. And then we give, just like Homeworks, we then certify those people to be able to specify and sell QS to Voya. But the sales bit, you either want to do it before or after, because learning how to sell more treatments than just one per window, because the other thing integrators always love to do is to go into a room and count the number of windows and then give an estimate going one blind per window. And actually, in a lot of homes, you want more than one treatment in a window. And you're making that decision for the homeowner without even asking them what they're using the room for. And often you might want a blackout and a sheer. You might want a sheer and a curtain. They might not want any in that room, but you've got to give people choice and explain to them about how this stuff layers up and give them, the ability to be able to
discovering how the homeowner sees themselves living in that space, what they are going to be doing, what the activities they're going to use in that space for. And then advising them, okay, for your decoration, this sits well, that might sit better. But technically, this is what you want to be looking for.
And it's, do you want privacy, or, do you want, is privacy your number one motivator, or is it not? Like, then straight away, you've worked out whether if it's a dark fabric, like, you said about preserving the view. If you've got a beautiful view of the ocean and you go and put in a white fabric because someone advised you that suits the aesthetics of the room, you just killed the view that you paid a fortune for. But if you put up a dark fabric and there happens to be a neighbor that can look in, well, guess what? You just lost all of your privacy. So if you're trying to achieve two things, you need dual treatment. You've got to have both colors, or you've got to have different.
And it's balancing those priorities is which is more important for you.
And that's the bit that the integrator needs to get confidence on.
To the customer as professionals in the industry. That's what we bring into.
Then the custom install channel, this sounds like a bit of a foreign topic and alien and frightening.
From you,
and this is never say that. And this is, I was waiting for the first accent joke to come out. But I mean, if you think about this is the same channel that we approached 20 to 30 years ago and said, you guys are doing a lot of stuff with low voltage cable. We want to introduce you to the benefit of working with a high voltage cable as well and doing lighting control. And the initial pushback then was, well, lighting controls for the electricians. We're not electricians. We're AV companies. And we said, but there's a market out here to do this in a smart fashion. Something that, requires a different set of skill sets, a different set of sort of chefing skills, if we're going back to our food analogy, to put this stuff together. And by the way, you can make decent money doing this. And those who came along on the lighting control journey have figured this out. Window treatments is the next thing along. Every job, you're going to have window treatments going into it. Someone has budgeted in a budget somewhere that there's going to be a curtain in the living room. All we're sitting there, trying to do is to get you to bring that into your budget. And for, a company who says that's a bit, I'm not comfortable with this, Kiana's how to sell shades training is excellent. It's 2 to 3 hours of your day, depending on how much she gets to talk. It's only 2 to 3 hours, but it runs you through a lot of things that aren't that complicated to get your head around in terms of theory and concepts, but make a huge difference. And what this allows you to do is go out a lot more educated when you're talking to someone. And I would probably say, do the how to sell shades training first, and then go talk to a few people. Because one of three things is going to happen. You'll either sit there and the first person you talk to gets very, very interested, and you want to immediately turn on and start doing the 4 days of installation training, things like that. Or you might get some questions that, start to get them quite interested, but you need more support. That's where, you come back to Habitech, Have a look at the showroom here. There are a bunch of window treatments here. Or bring your clients into Moorgate. And again, we can have that further shades conversation, develop those stories a little bit more. And again, it's a way to go ahead and add another revenue stream. For any company that's looking to increase their revenue, you can do this in one of two ways. You can go out and you can find additional jobs to do every single year, which generally means you need additional manpower, additional capital, or you can just sell more that you've got onto those existing jobs.
Yeah.
And we're not looking for you to try and, with window treatments, at least try and bring something entirely new and foreign. As I said, window treatments are already going into a house. You're just looking to bring those into your package and add a little bit of the magic to them.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. Cool. I think that's everything. Thank you very much for your time, Dan,
Thanks,
Kiana, George. Good work.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And
Thank you.
yeah, great. Thanks very much.